progress under democracy in advancing media freedom. Hence, today we have this webinar. It is also our interest as government of South Africa that we safeguard media freedom. Why? Because a free media is an integral part of our democracy, and government is committed to press freedom. We value our regular interactions with the media formations, such as the organized formations, your SANEF, the Press Club, the Press Gallery, Foreign Correspondents Associations, Association of Independent Publishers, and the National Community Radio Forum, amongst others. And it is in our interest that we safeguard their freedom as it's enshrined in our Constitution. And media freedom is an integral part of our democracy. And the architects of our democracy, especially the democratic dispensation that we are in now, insisted that media freedom be a fundamental feature of our new society. And as we can see today, media is playing a role that is being entrenched in the Constitution, and they are essential to us in building an open and inclusive information society. The Bill of Rights articulates the essential role of the media in our society. The right to freedom of expression is enshrined in Section 16 of the Constitution. Section 16.1 guarantees that every person has the right to freedom of expression, which includes freedom of the press and other media, freedom to receive or impart information or ideas, freedom of artistic creativity, academic freedom, and freedom of scientific research. Now, many media have become an important vehicle through which citizens are able to freely express themselves. It is through the media that South Africans have an opportunity to enter into public debate. Media are a key player in assisting national dialogue of national unity and social cohesion. And as government, obviously, we are playing our role in making sure that we strengthen the media freedom that is there. And to that extent, I need to indicate that we have begun a process of participating in conversations on media sustainability with other organized media formations, including, of course, and not limited to SANEF and its partners. And we hope that in the near future, we will begin seeing the green shoots from the discussions, because we are all having the responsibility to ensure that journalism continues to thrive in South Africa. I think you might be aware by now that on the issue of media sustainability, that the government established the MDDA in 2002 because of the need for supporting a vibrant community and small commercial media sector in the country to make sure that they safeguard our democracy, and we fully recognize that the need is as great today as it was then. Now, in August 2020, the MDDA held a consultative conference to consult the sector, government, and all role players on strategies that we must put in place to ensure sustainability of the sector over time. And in 2021, the study on community media sustainability model was commissioned, and currently I think it's being concluded. So that showed also the commitment of government to say what role should we play in making sure that we retain the freedom that is being given to the media. And what this has shown was the value also of the role of the media in our fight against COVID-19. And I think I'll take this opportunity, facilitator, to say that on behalf of government, we appreciate the good work of our media during the COVID-19 pandemic. Journalists work diligently to inform the nation about COVID-19 and help citizens understand the spread and impact of the virus. Our journalists have been at the forefront in the fight against the virus by widely sharing our message to vaccinate. Therefore, in marking Freedom Day, we remember the brave journalists who lost their lives whilst bringing reliable information to our homes. Now, as we celebrate and commemorate Black Wednesday, our call is that we must put an end to some of the challenges that we are seeing now. And I think, Prof, you would agree with me that due to now the introduction of social media and new media, we have realized that now media encompasses everything, including that which does not pretend to abide by the true codes that distinguishes journalism, which ought to abide by those codes. While journalism is part of media, it is, of course, expected to be distinguishable from the rest that care less about the codes applicable to journalism. And in this regard, journalism now has a challenge of how do they now steer clear of marketing, commercial, powerful interests, personalities, and lobby groups that obviously would have to, are looking to infiltrate us. Those are some of the challenges that we have to guard against because journalism is an area that has to protect the nation, is an area that has to be a window through which a nation can see itself, but it's also a very important component of building a society. So it is thus that we also look at playing a very critical role in making sure that we assist in the protection, the sustainability of this important trade. I'm looking forward to a healthy exchange of ideas today so that out of this, also as government, we are able to have that touch of what are other issues that we need to do more, as long as we also agree that we need to protect the integrity of this noble profession. Maybe I need to also indicate that as government, we are engaging media owners on a media transformation and revitalization program. We have already met with the owners of print media. I remember it was on the 11th of July this year, and we will continue to engage various stakeholders. We are working on a print and digital media transformation and revitalization steering committee. So this shows us that we are committed to making sure that all instruments that are there to safeguard the democracy that we have get support from all sectors. Yes, I know that it will be a continuous, sometimes confrontational mode, but as long as the bigger picture is out of building a bigger society. So I do look forward, facilitator, to a very, very informative and healthy exchanges that we will be having today. On that note, let me take this opportunity to welcome you all, and with those remarks, to give over back to the facilitator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baloy. And I think as William himself said, and so did I, our Director General, Pumla Williams, wanted to be part of this engagement, as she does every year. But it just couldn't be helped because there were meetings that she couldn't delegate to anybody else, and she had to attend as a cabinet spokesperson. But let's move on. Thank you very much for representing her so well, Mr. Baloy. let's move on because we really want to get into the meat of the discussions. And I think we want to welcome the Deputy Chairperson of the SANEF, Nwabisa Makunga. Please, can we ask you to share with us some preliminary thoughts, and then we'll take 3 or 4 hands after you've spoken. Over to you, Nwabisa.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you so much, Tasneem. It is an absolute pleasure for us to be here. Thank you for the invitation to what we really believe is an important discussion. Mr. Baloy, I did enjoy your input. I think, though, I just want to pick up before I even give my input, I want to pick up on the very last point that you made, and I think I'll be doing a great disservice on behalf of SANEF if I don't do that. We appreciate the fact that there was, that engagement, particular with owners of print media, as you say. We appreciate the efforts that you are making in that regard. We would like to suggest, however, that when such a conversation happens, that it does not leave editors, out of the room, because this is not because our owners, our bosses, as it were, do not understand or do not know what the challenges are. But we do think that we will be able to enrich the conversation if you have the people who represent those on the shop floor of the newsroom. And so we humbly make the request that when that kind of conversation happens, we would really be part of it. And as far as SANEF is concerned, we are more than happy to make representations in that regard. Having putting that aside, again, colleagues, I want to say thank you very much for this opportunity. I think I will not go into really the history of Black Wednesday. I think everybody who's in this room is obviously quite aware of what it means to us. We do want to say, however, that it is an era that was not only painful for our forebears and our nation at large, but it is an era that we believe currently, as journalists, operating in the sector, that we would have much to benefit to draw lessons from, and perhaps see how we are able to shape the work that we do and build on that history to shape the work that we do going forward. That era forms part of what we ought to never forget. It was defining for our nation. It was one that really showed what courageous journalism is and what courageous journalism is able to do. Yet, unfortunately, as much as we truly understand what had happened at the time and hope that we may have drawn many lessons, we do think that journalists today face a tremendous deal of pressure. It may be different to what our forebears had faced, but we do think that the challenges somewhat are similar. And I really want to just talk about perhaps 3 points of discussion that, if you will, are things that really keep us awake at night. And the first one is about the economic pressure, and I think, Mr. Baloy, you alluded to this earlier, the economic pressure on newsrooms and the sustainability of, in particular, public interest journalism. I think several reports in our industry speak of the decimation of newsrooms across our country. And this is in particular during the COVID-19 time. It does, of course, the crisis does predate that period, but we do think obviously COVID-19 really did accelerate the kind of decimation I'm talking about. And this is largely because of, as we know, diminishing revenues. This is largely because of, competing digital platforms and the convenience perhaps that they're able to offer, our readers, and the fact that conversations, as you said, Tasneem, actually happen in real time. And we must ask ourselves really what it is that we are able to do to keep, in particular, public interest journalism sustainable. There is great work As it has been previously alluded, there is great work that SANIF is busy with, together with, I think Professor Guy Berger did the other day a workshop really as far as sustainability to ask some of the important questions, looking at, yes, the different models across the world of how to sustain the media, but what is it that may perhaps work from us? How do we learn lessons from that and adapt them to the unique environment in which we operate? So the first, I suppose, issue that does keep us awake at night is the economic pressures that we do face. The second one, colleagues, is the attacks on journalism, but not just journalism and by extension journalists themselves. There is no denying, in our view, that there is a concerted effort from some quarters of our country to undermine, discredit the very craft of journalism. This largely manifests itself in the attacks on individual journalists and the work that they do when they demand accountability from powerful players. These attacks are often, they often sometimes happen on social media, and they're often gendered. They're increasingly egregious. They're increasingly complex. And I think many of us would remember just this week, we saw a journalist who stood in court, Karen Moore, News 24 journalist, who essentially our view is that has been criminalized for doing the work that many of us do on a daily basis to publish information that is in the public. I want to be clear that we are not, and we know that this is a very kind of hot topic at the moment. Our view is really not that, with the court process having been where it is now, we're not suggesting that, they ought not to have been there, as in to kind of be above the law. We are, however, saying that we believe that such acts, particularly based on very questionable facts, are really an abuse of power, an abuse of the legal system that we have. And this is really the point that we're making about the kind of attacks that journalists face being increasingly complex. However, we do believe that these are conversations we ought to have. These attacks on journalists happen on, when our teams are out in public doing about their work. Journalists get attacked and robbed and harassed, in particular those who are female. These challenges kind of intersect with criminality to create a very unbearable environment for journalists to be able to do their work. They often weaponize very real challenges within our country and our journalism to frame it as this false narrative that journalists in South Africa and perhaps elsewhere are, by virtue of what we do, enemies of the people. These are the kinds of phrases we've seen elsewhere in the world and are hugely problematic as far as kind of criminalizing journalists, but not only that, delegitimizing journalists as people, but also delegitimizing the craft of journalism itself. And the question we must ask is that what is it that we are doing as a society to be able to push back, to be able to protect really the values of not only of journalism, but on a broader scale, the values of transparency, accountability, as really constitutional values that all of us have or should embrace. The third thing, colleague, that I think is a concern for us, and this one is really about our own self-reflection in the media. I think about 2 or 3 years ago, the SANIF did commission a report on media ethics and credibility into the South African journalism industry. We did not, in that report, we did not unfortunately come out smelling like roses. While there were many challenges that had been highlighted, we felt that there were very systemic problems in our newsrooms, which, although some may not necessarily be deliberate, but they do compromise ethical journalism. So the question then we must ask ourselves, and we continue to do so, is how do we strengthen our systems to ensure that there is accountability? How do we empower those who regulators, for example, such as the Press Council, to ensure that the systems of accountability are agile as they ought to be. There was troublesome information, of course, that comes out at times which is that there were instances of willful and deliberate flouting of journalistic integrity, and perhaps for sinister ends. And we need to reflect on these, colleagues, and ask ourselves those comfortable questions about how we've done as an industry, what we've done as an industry to contribute to this, what interventions are needed systemically to kind of promote the accountability that we talk about. And where necessary, what kind of investment do we need to do in the, on the newsroom shop floor to strengthen the systems that I talk about that really safeguard credible and quality journalism. I want to pause there, colleagues, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Nwabisa. You've certainly given us lots of food for thought. I know I want to already jump into a conversation with you, but let's open it up. Let's see if there are any hands, anybody that does want to support anything you're saying or ask a question. All right, let's give it another 10 seconds. There's always people with things on their mind, but not necessarily want to air it on the public space. But if there's no other, no questions, I think you raise very, very critical issues, Nwabisa, and if I may say, some of the issues you raise are not necessarily issues that, or challenges that are facing the media sector alone. It's probably challenges that face our society as a whole, and it affects all sectors. So it's also about the kind of ethics and ethical value system that as a society we want to build, and we want to make sure that we grow. So just on the ethical issues, and just on how we nurture and protect the freedoms, including media freedom, that we all fought so hard for. I think that's a much broader conversation we need to have. And I think, it's we should get together more often than once a year to talk about these issues. I did see a hand, Sandile Nene, wanted to make a point. Can we hear you, Sandile?
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having this conversation. It is a great conversation to have. I just wanted to maybe make, I think it may have been an omission on the side of Nwabisa, the exclusion of SANEF, maybe just to correct that part, that SANEF was part to the preliminary sessions that we had, and as well as the final meeting that we had with the minister and the owners. And also just to indicate that the steering committee that's been formed, SANEF do have a representation. So I thought maybe let's make that correction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's not in our interest to leave SANEF out of any of the discussions. But I think, William and Nwabisa, I think it's time now that COVID is almost past us. It's time to start planning for the next SANEF meets government session, because, I think those have always been useful in sharing some frank thoughts on what the difficulties are on both sides, and also helping to improve our understanding of each other's work. So I really think it's time for us to start doing that, and to see if we can come together, because many of the issues that Nwabisa raises are issues that we ourselves are facing, and as public servants, and also as public servants in a particular space, and also in broader society. It's not just journalists that are criminalized or delegitimized in the social media space. Oftentimes, vested interests connive to make sure that somebody is victimized, individuals are victimized who are trying to speak to the truth. And it's just something that is, it's not a new development, but certainly the mechanisms are new mechanisms. And I don't know that we as a society have necessarily got a handle on how we want to address that in the future. But maybe it's the opportune time to move on to our next speaker and see whether there are lessons from around the world that might help us. So let me please introduce Professor Guy Berger. I've already spoken about him shortly, so I think without wasting any time, let's pass over to you. Thank you, Prof. Berger.
Thank you, Tasneem. Dear friends and colleagues, thank you for inviting me. I'd like to introduce a concept called news deserts. I picked this up when I was working at UNESCO over the past 10 years. And news deserts has been defined by a university in the US as meaning a community that has limited access to the credible and comprehensive news which feeds democracy at grassroots level. So that's a news desert. Obviously, it's a metaphor taken from a real desert. In the US, where this concept was first proposed, since 2004, more than 2,100 newspapers have closed down. And in a quarter of those cases, digital news sites have filled the gap. But otherwise, there's a loss. They're gone. So you see in the USA, a rich country that is in the grip of news desertification. And that may explain why so many people in that country, very dangerously and against all the evidence, that they believe the big lie that Donald Trump won the last presidential elections. And we know where that belief led. And in the upcoming US elections, we hope that that's not going to that misinformation is not going to lead again to the kind of violence and insurrection that one saw before. Now, in South Africa, news deserts are nothing new, of course, because under apartheid, some news was available to white South African men about white South African men. But mainly, that audience got propaganda, not news. And most South Africans lived in complete news deserts. There was no news about their concerns, especially not in their mother tongues or about their local affairs. And today, despite some improvements, this continues to be the general case for the majority of our compatriots. So it was bad back in the apartheid era, and it's not much better now. However, historically, it was not all drought. There were some journalists, a few newspapers and private radio stations that did do real news, albeit mainly in English. Their work took place against huge odds, not least political. On October 19, 1977, when I was a university student becoming conscientized, I learned that thanks to the apartheid government's bannings, it would no longer be possible to read The World, The Weekend World, amongst others. Metaphorically speaking, this was like pulling people's tongues out or throwing concrete into their eyes and their ears. It was the equivalent of an internet shutdown back in the day. However, we know at least that despite those bannings, passionate journalists, real journalists, did find ways forward to tell real stories. And so 10 years after the 1977 bannings, a significant, although small, alternative press had come into being. This included one newspaper that I edited, South newspaper in Cape Town, and another was New Nation, for which I was a foreign correspondent when I was in exile. And I'm proud to have been part of that journalism because all this journalism helped to combine to play a part in toppling apartheid. Significantly, that alternative press was enabled by donor subsidy, foreign donors. Only one, the Weekly Mail, today the Mail and Guardian, was able to make it once the donor funds diminished after the advent of democracy. Still, the journalists in that alternative press had set an example. Many of them went on to help transform the mainstream media, including SABC, after 1994. At the same time, the demise of most of the alternative press is a sign that the survival of media in a tough marketplace should not be taken for granted. And that's a lesson very relevant today. Earlier this year, in July, in fact, I retired from 10 years working at UNESCO, and I came back to South Africa. Now, people may know the name UNESCO. It's part of the UN. It's known for World Heritage Sites and for cultural heritage preservation. And on that basis, it was very moving for me to come back to South Africa and see the heritage of real journalism is alive and well in this country and protected by our democratic constitution. So I want to underline just how lucky this country is to have this legacy as part of our heritage. And despite the damaging years of state capture, whose difficulties are still with us, numerous journalists kept faith with their professional integrity and their calling. Here, I'd like to pay tribute to SANEF, which stood resilient against capture. And we should also salute its members who, like their peers in the judiciary, stood up for integrity and independence of their professional and for the public service role that is required of journalists and of judges. The point I'm making here is that against the international trends of growing news deserts, South Africa still has an invaluable resource. It's true journalists and their journalism. Many countries don't have this. Like water, we South Africans need to recognize that the resource of journalism is very precious. It needs to be treasured, cherished, and protected, holding the dry season at bay. Now, we know that there are indeed many forces that have diametrically opposite views on this subject. These are people who would prefer that there's no journalism, because in a news desert, there's no competition for falsehoods. Lies can be sowed at will, weeds can thrive unchecked, and they can grow and overshadow important truths that society has a right to know about. The apartheid regime knew this, and this is why their controls over society were not only through brute force, but through information control, propaganda, disinformation, and enforced news deserts. Journalism in South Africa, like everywhere else, can never be taken for granted. We just have to look frankly and honestly at our recent experiences. Government advertising was abused to support the Gupta's media weapons. The SABC was captured to become complicit in wider state capture. Today, there's a mess in Parliament's appointment of a new board to SABC. The MDDA that should support small and rural media is partly paralyzed. Today, we still have to see if the Sunday Times has really learned from its experience where its reporters forfeited their claim to be journalists by playing political games that nearly destroyed government's revenues that are collected by the national tax system, not to mention the destruction of the lives of many dedicated civil servants. Then, as was mentioned by the editor of the Sowetan, Nwabisa, just in the previous remark, we've seen political elements, along with some members of the police and the public, blatantly threatening and intimidating the press. Trolling of journalists on Twitter and other platforms is rampant, particularly of women journalists. Quality standards at independent newspapers seem to have collapsed in many cases, and some of their coverage is instrumentalized for particularly narrow purposes. Some sewage has seeped into our water supply. A former student of mine from the days when I headed the Rhodes University School of Journalism and Media Studies, Karen Morn, is, as Nwabisa mentioned, facing harassment in a court case brought by a past president. In short, a lot needs to be done in South Africa to uphold and reinforce the norms of press freedom and for respect of the value of real journalism. We should not take it for granted that the situation cannot get worse. At the same time, we can note that so far, neither apartheid colonialism, nor the experience of capture, nor of COVID, nor of contemporary coercion, none of these have succeeded in destroying journalism in this country. Our hero is battered, but still standing. However, what these negative forces have failed to do so far, something else now is threatening to achieve. This is a trend globally that is driving news deserts, even in developed countries like the USA, as I noted at the outset. This trend is eating away at the sustainable supply of journalism, with a disastrous portent of our existing trickle of news in this country, let alone the erosion of any aspirations to transform news deserts that still afflict most South Africans. This trend is, of course, the intensifying decline of advertising in the news media. Advertising was a mechanism designed mainly to enhance economic exchange, with news media providing the marketplace and taking some of the revenue to pay for the costs of producing the news, which attracted the audiences to come to the location in the first place. Now, while I was at UNESCO, I was part of commissioning The Economist magazine, their research arm, to examine the economic impact of COVID on the news industry. They produced a really authoritative report, aptly titled Breaking News, which shows just how much Google and Facebook have been gaining more and more and more and more of the advertising market. And today, TikTok has joined this no-holds-barred feast. Needless to say, none of these internet companies has, as their core purpose, the production of journalism for the public. In fact, they prefer to promote purely emotional content, since this wins popular engagement. However, in the data game, they have been able to exploit the public, the users, by being better able to market our detailed profiles to advertisers, using up to 300 data points about each of us. Each of us, 300 data points about what we like, what we dislike, where we go, what our weaknesses are, what our tastes are, what our susceptibilities are, so they can create individual profiles that allow for precision marketing and behavioral manipulation. No news media can compete, and nor should it compete, with this advertising bombardment that is powered by this kind of surveillance intelligence and big data analytics. There can be absolutely no doubt that if this trend carries on, the mass of South Africans, already insufficiently serviced, will face an ever-shrinking news supply. The desertification, already bad, will just grow. Imagine if GCIS calls a press conference and there are no real journalists available to attend it. What if the Department of Health offers training about how to cover this new virus, the monkeypox? But again, what if there are no real journalists who could translate expertise into news? I can tell you what will happen. In the vacuum, there will be no shortage of what the French call divertissement, content which diverts your attention. In other words, entertainment. Entertainment is great, but it's not a substitute for information. There will also be no shortage of public relations content, often surreptitious, agenda-laden, and untrustworthy. And most seriously, there will be no shortage of disinformation in that kind of news desert. So, Of news, there will be little sign, unless that is you're in the top elite and can pay large fees for a news subscription. But even so, there will be no grassroots news that can feed into this top tier, which means that there is a limited reading of reality, even for the top decision makers. What's to be done about this? Well, because this event today is commendably organized by government, let me address what government can do. 5 quick things. First, government has such a major role to play in preserving the norms of journalism and press freedom, to speak out against threats and to promote popular respect for journalists, even if politicians disagree with them on many occasions. It's important to publicize events like this to young people. Every journalism school in the country should be encouraged to follow this and other events, not only this year, but every year. More outreach is needed to market this kind of engagement. It was mentioned before by you, Tasneem, to have a government media meeting. This would be an excellent idea, particularly to start planning so that the next elections are not contaminated by attacks on press freedom. That's the first thing. The second thing is government must sort out the problems at SABC and MDDA. Frankly, this is an embarrassment. Government must ensure that these institutions have sustainable operations and are doing what they need to do. Thirdly, although the competition is obviously independent of government, as part of the state apparatus, it needs to concentrate its energies and compel some recompense from big tech to the news media. This is partially because big tech makes money from journalism on their platforms, and big tech is also a dominant player and a referee in advertising technology, ad tech. Then there's also the principle that a polluter should pay. You pollute the water supply, you should help pay for the ongoing cleanup. Journalism is like bleach to water that's contaminated. And journalism needs resourcing if society is to have journalism, the bleach, in sufficient quantity and quality. So can the Competition Commission consider this, given the damage being done to the information fabric by the tech giants? Fourth point, let's get CARA, C-A-R-A, to work in supporting journalism. CARA is the Corrupt Assets Recovery Account in the Department of Justice. It has 250 million rand in it currently, according to the Daily Maverick. Usually such funds are given out to the State Security Agency and to ethics training for civil servants. It's a no-brainer that investigative journalism is what has helped recover at least a part of these stolen public funds. And it's a no-brainer that a standing percentage of what is in CARA, Corrupt Assets Recovery Account, should be allocated to an independent fund that could support much needed investigative journalism, particularly at local level, which is so neglected. And local level is where people are most concretely disadvantaged by existing in news deserts. And fifthly, let's find more funds to invest in new journalism. There are a host of government funds for SMMEs. There's a need for a special stream in these that can cater for the difficult conditions of new journalism startups. So to wind up, 5 things for government. 1, publicize press freedom. 2, sort out SABC and MDDA. 3, concentrate efforts by the Competition Commission. 4, get CARA contributing to journalism. And 5, avail capital for media startups. So in conclusion, I've used this metaphor of deserts and of water, and everybody could acknowledge that clean water is a public good to which everyone is entitled. So too, at UNESCO, its 194 member states, including South Africa, have recognized that information is a public good. And of course, journalism is key to information. UNESCO states recognized this last year in November in endorsing the principles of what is called the Windhoek +30 Declaration. For water to reach the public, it needs to be conserved, purified, and pumped, and that takes money. And likewise, journalism needs to be valued, and public interest calls on us to find the formula where it can earn appreciation and be paid for. We do face urgent challenges to save what journalism we are lucky still to have, but our ambition should also be higher. to expand the supply of good journalism to the majority who do not have enough to guide their daily democratic and developmental lives. So let this be our mantra for this year's National Press Freedom Day. We owe it to our heritage and to our future that with widespread support, including from government, we can let our news deserts bloom as befits our nation's needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Very sobering thoughts there. And I think something, I must say, there's absolutely nothing you said that I don't agree with. I agree with everything you've said, and Nwabisa also agree with, although I think that we do need to broaden it. It's not just journalists that are under attack in our society. And I think it is also, those that are anti-democratic, definitely on the warpath. If you look at news reports on what's happening at Eskom, what's happening at Transnet, what's happening at in private institutions as well, I definitely think we people with the democracy at heart need to come together and make sure that we put the right resources in the right places. And I think also, I would totally agree that government has a big role to play, and it's not for lack of effort. I think one of the things that you said, Prof. Berger, in passing, is that we've not actually counted the devastation of state capture. I think we're still recovering from it in many instances. We haven't yet found the resources to fix some of the losses we've incurred on all sides. So I think it's definitely something that we need to talk about more, and definitely something that we need to come together on so that we're not alone as we're trying to recover. But I think there was also something that Nwabisa said that was quite interesting around the ethics, ethics in journalism report, and also William mentioned it in his opening remarks as well. There is some concern when journalists overstep their mark, and I mean, brown envelope journalism is by no means a new thing, but in societies in which inequality and unemployment are rising, they tend to become more common than in more stable societies. It happens in all societies, but of course, we would want to reduce this as much as possible. And then the question becomes, in a self-regulated sector, what do we do about institutions that refuse to be adjudicated by by a common regulatory body? And I think that is not something I'm suggesting at all, that we need more governance or we need more regulation, but certainly we need to talk about it so that we can prevent it from happening. I'm now opening the floor to just take a few hands. I've seen that one of our panelists had a hand up. I'm not sure whether you want to contribute to this particular conversation, Tiny. Okay, if not, can I just see, is there anybody that would like to say anything? Vanessa, are we certain that that people can raise their hands? Okay, any comments? Well, it seems that everybody just agrees with the two speakers that have come before. So if there's nothing else, let's move on. I just also want to assure the panel members that this event is being live streamed, but also it is going to be on YouTube. So many people who couldn't make today, there's a lot of things happening today. Many people who couldn't make today, I'm sure they would be very, very interested in the remarks that you've made. Both of the speakers that have gone before and the speakers that are coming. All right. Let's move on. I think we are going to now be hearing from Ms. Tiny Kwao. She's the national salesperson for Arena Holdings, and I think it's a good time for her to come on board, seeing as we have started venturing into what happens in a world when advertising investments are dwindling. How do we make sure that we protect journalism, independent journalism? So I think we'll be ready to take Tiny, and I think she's got a presentation. Am I correct?
Yes,
Okay.
I do have a presentation, Tasneem.
Okay. I think if you could please ask Vanessa to put it up because I've not received it. Thank you.
Okay, okay, let me present without it. Can you hear me, Tasneem?
Yes, we can. Please go
Okay,
ahead.
I think for someone who started in media when we were doing plates to make a newspaper, then it goes to pre-press and then it goes to a machine that prints the pages. It is encouraging to see how much media has converged in the past. I mean, I can't even say past 28 years because I've been in media for 28 years. What is media convergence? I mean, media convergence is communication across the world that has evolved with advent of technology and new media. We had old media as well as currently we have new media. There's several ways to exhibit your work currently, whether it's you voice your opinion or issues or spread knowledge or information, or you make people aware of where you are, what you are doing at that point in time. I have a slide that shows how media evolution has happened over the years. I'll try and paint the picture. The first one is where we used to connect to radio via a radio frequency. You'll have to get the right station on the radio for you to be able to listen to radio. And we have migrated currently, and the media has converged. You can listen to radio. You can listen to radio via internet. You can also listen to radio, I mean, on your cell phone, you put headphones and you can get a radio. While in the past, you have to have the actual radio. I mean, in the past they were big. Some of them were looking like an old room divider. We have since migrated from that. Let's go to newspapers. Newspapers in the past were printed the old way, where you find all media houses would have a big printing machine that prints the newspaper. Everything was manually, the proofs were down manually, and then the actual printing of newspaper would go like a round circle into the printing press. And then we go to telephone. We had a telephone where you would only have a phone if you have a telecom line that you have to, I mean, in the past you used to dial numbers using a round 360 cycle. Currently, a telephone is a portable a handheld, a smartphone, or any other cell phone that we currently using. The question is, have we foreseen how much the media is going to converge the way it has? The answer is no. Plans were made that there's something called a computer that's gonna come up. It's gonna take away the typing. In media in the past, there used to be people were employed to type things on a typewriter. So the evolution in convergence has really gone to high level. We also seen a lot of, the international market has converged quicker than most of us in South Africa. Specifically in South Africa, your community radio, your community newspaper, they have taken longer to get to the level where your bigger media are already operating. Universities as well are currently producing multi-platforms, journalists or students. Even in advertising, you no longer having a print advertising salesperson, you have a platforms sales individual. So what does it mean? It means things have changed. If things change in the traditional media, when the merging new media comes, we find a middle ground and infuse elements from the past, including elements from what we would call the future. Let's look at how much these gadgets have really changed how the convergence work. In the past, TV was separate. Streaming of watching your Netflix and others was separate. Print media, your newspaper was a separate medium. Books were a separate medium. Currently, in one cell phone, you can read books on any of the apps. You can watch TV. You can listen to music. You can listen to radio. You can use it as a computer. Online radio, converging into radio from analog to online radio as well as internet radio, where in the past, because of signal, there were hindrance in connecting to radio. Ebooks, which have converged paperbacks. We're no longer having people buying the actual books. And digital technology has made it even worse because there are apps where you can buy digital as books at a maybe 20 or 50, and the actual books and printing of the books. Printing of the books is no longer happening. New websites and apps, websites in the past were stagnant. Currently websites, they have video, they have audio, they have adverts. In a website these days, there's little you can't find, including areas where hybrid engagement like the one we have, You can put a link on a website so that anyone, whenever they get a chance, they can click and have access of the content that was done on the 13th of October, but they can still get it later. Technology in terms of media convergence has make sure that it crosses the barriers. It also closes the gaps between those who have high-tech technology and those who have an entry-level technology. There are three main types of media convergence: is technology, economic, and cultural. And there's also three C's of media convergence, which is communication, content, and computing. Media convergence infuse and unite these three C's. Let's go and unpack the technological convergence. Technological convergence enable different technologies to interoperate efficiently in a convergent system. I'll make it an example. If you use technology, currently they are busy testing in China how to send a high capacity storage information. I think they're working on 1 terabyte at the moment, where they can send that information in 10 minutes. The test was done a week back. Apparently it has gone through. Currently in South Africa, even if you're using a high, 15, 20 gigabytes that you are sending out, chances you're gonna get a little bit of buffering. So technology, as it advances, and it creates an environment where you can do things faster. You can sometimes ensure that a task that used to take 3 hours takes 2 minutes. I'm going to make an example in terms of us in print media. For us to lay out a page, in the past, we used to do it manually. It used to take something like, meaning if we are laying out a page, you are doing the actual page plan, where you're gonna have the area where content is gonna sit and the area where advertising is going to sit. So you'll find out it took about 2-3 hours, because you used to physically take a paper, a ruler, and physically draw in the sizes accordingly. Currently, it's done electronically, and that process could take anything from 2 minutes to 5 minutes. That is how important convergence and technology convergence in media convergence. Economic convergence is, a single company will be able to do what they couldn't do in a month in a short space of time, and it will save them money. For example, these days, if you want to shoot a video, whether it's an event or something is happening somewhere, if you have a good smartphone with high capacity pixel, you will be able to shoot a high definition video without have hired a video company, a videographer, as well as a video editor. So in terms of shortening the process, it's also taking away other jobs that would have been a supporting structure to come with a proper final product. Another one which is interesting in terms of economic convergence, if you look at the companies like Sony, AOL, Time Warner Bros., they used to be in films only, but from films, they managed to get into gaming. Some of the games, are taken from the best-selling film, like your Star Wars and other films. But they don't have to print CDs, DVDs for those films. Now you can stream, and they make streaming to have layers of amounts, where if you want to stream at a high level, standard level, and so on, it goes exactly what your YouTube are doing. You will use more data if you want a certain quality in terms of technology. So economic convergence is centered within the technology convergence, especially in media. You find a lot of companies and media houses crossing all other aspects of industries. I mean, they will be in real estate, they'll be in music, like in our stable where I'm coming from at Arena, we also have Galo as part of our offering. So we're not only into media in terms of print, electronic, and apps and so on, we're also into other forms of media that makes us to be able to play into the media space and on all levels. And then the third one, the cultural convergence. I mean, we are exposed in terms of media on any culture because now the world has become shorter. I mean, if you look at TikTok, you will find a video of somebody dancing and the language, you can't even understand it, but the beats, you can dance to it. Now we sort of picking up your Mandarin, basic words on Mandarin because we are exposed to content and to media that is around the world. I believe also in South Africa, there's an increase of people who are taking the free online courses on different languages. I mean, without internet and media convergence, we wouldn't be exposed to that. For me to be able to learn French or whichever language, I'd have to take money and go to a school and sit in a classroom and learn the language. Currently, internet and the media convergence has made, I mean, classroom anywhere you can connect and listen to somebody or a presenter or a lecturer. What it also did in terms of cultural, I mean, because English now, with all this new convergence, is a medium language. You won't understand if you don't, I mean, put content in English. Currently, if my mother tongue is Tswana, I speak more English than my mother tongue. And people, even if I put something in, whether in my social networks, or I write something as a journalist or whoever content has been put out, people will understand it if you put it in a medium, and the medium in English language. You find in other countries where there were war immigrants who have gone to stay in other countries, they come in the country and they speak maybe Setsonga or whichever language. They tend to change and speak more English so that they can be understood and they can converse with anyone in that particular country. So is English a cultural language? That's a story for another day. What are the disadvantages of a media convergence? Content integration, faster access, and international reach. These are some of the highlights of disadvantage of impact of media convergence. Difficulty in assessing consumers. Consumers now are also creators, but also they scattered amongst different platforms. If, for example, you look at the new platforms, the new media, which are your webinar, you will find that people go and source what interests them. So it's difficult to say, Utaini as a target audience, she will be sitting here at this time. My needs and interest in terms of consuming media is changing constantly. We find ourselves in the media space having to analyze and come up with solution on how do we meet our consumers at any platform they navigate to. You'll find I navigate to three or 7 platforms in one day. So we have to always, as we converge, cater for each platform accordingly, so that when you reach me at that platform, you can find me and I'm able to give you the kind of response. As a result, to get a proper, honest response for any medium is difficult these days. You can attest, everyone on virtually can attest that nobody is honest. I mean, look at the trolls. You'll find some of the trolls on media platforms are not even talking about what you posted, but they're dragging you on something else that they have picked up out of what you posted. There's more competition for consumer time and attention. I mean, this is where advertising comes in media convergence, because we're now able to package a holistic package that says, for you to be able to find Tiny when she's at work, this is the medium you're gonna reach her on. For you to find Tiny when she's gone home, this is where you're gonna find her. So we're able to constantly find where our consumers are sitting and what they are doing and how to reach them. Audiences often feel overwhelmed with massive amounts of information overload. I think we all can attest, information overload is a lot. Go to, Instagram, you look at the reels, there's always information overload. Besides the interesting stuff where there'll be a dance that is introduced or something that is current at that time, but there's always gonna be information overload. We also worry in terms of media convergence of the older generation and the disabled section of our communities. Because if I don't have, if I don't have hands, for example, and I need to use a smartphone, it's going to be difficult for me to scroll and do a lot of other things. That means I'll be able to use a smartphone for calls and other stuff. However, the older generation are also used to, we call it a hello, goodbye. Now, when everything is gonna move to an internet and online, we have a section of our community that is not catered for, because they're still doing things the old way. They're still buying books, they're still buying newspapers, they still go to the cinema to watch a movie. They're not yet even vested into electronic banking. So it's gonna be difficult for that segment of the market to say, we going into media convergence, so you must just go with the flow. Unfortunately, the communities, the disabled as well as the older generation, they're not easily adaptable to new technology. Maybe the new smartphone they were told Elon Musk is gonna launch it in the next 10, 20 years, where it's gonna be biometric. The SIM card will be placed in your hand. You talk through the SIM card. You charge your phone via air, no longer electricity. I think it's gonna work for us in South Africa because we have load shedding. So in terms of the disadvantages, I'm going to highlight one last one, which is it's prone to security, cyber attacks, and malfunctioning. I think it's one of the key areas some other people are not already into the internet space because they are worried of security. I'm not gonna touch on all the advantages, but I'll just take two. One of the main advantage for media convergence is the traditional media meeting the new media. I'll make an example. Podcast, anybody can own a media by just having a microphone and something to record and then you can then upload it into YouTube or any of the other medias. Another advantage that I need to highlight, I mean, Snapchat. I was shocked to find out that on Snapchat, when I'm not on the app, it sends me messages, who's on my contact list, who's currently on the Snapchat. So all these media convergence and new platforms and new media, I mean, whether they regulated or not regulated, they form part of the life that we are living. Some, I mean, I have colleagues who wake up at night because their phone, they set a reminder. If so-and-so posts something on their page, they get a ping. Then somebody jumps out of their sleep so that they don't want to miss out anything. My concern in terms of the advantage is that you get every information when you need it right there. You don't suffer from FOMO because you current. I mean, and another one is media convergence. The audiences also become creators themselves. You'll find in some instances, we post a video of an accident that has happened. Somebody else posts it again with a different angle. People, whenever good or bad things happen, you'll find them with their cell phone taking videos. I mean, how do you differentiate between a consumer? A consumer who also is a creator. I mean, the environment, the media environment is gonna change even worse when data becomes cheaper, because that's also a barrier to entry for other people, because the biggest currently, if you have a young child at home, you switch off Wi-Fi, there's war. I mean, data connectivity is the main commodity these days. It's competing with bread and milk. Lastly, on this slide, I also want to also mention one benefit that has brought in the limitation of traditional media and blending it with new media, those providing instant and latest content. Another problem with internet and convergence of media, we also became doctors. If I'm not feeling well, I'm going to Google. I have a scratchy throat. What's wrong with me? Google's come back on internet and say, you might have a throat infection. I go to the pharmacy, I ask for a lozenge, whatever I can. I mean, everybody is becoming an expert. As someone who worked for a media house for 28 years, which is Arena, for me, yes, there's space for community, call it community journalists, but there's also space for journalists who have mastered their craft, who understand how much to research and investigate and put out a content that is credible. Because these days, the consumers will become also the creators. Who is responsible for policing them? There's so many cases in South Africa of people who put things online and they're taken to court, to be proven wrong that, it was a hearsay, that was not a fact. So in this media convergence, the experts in all these media houses, whether it's TV, radio, print, magazine, are there, and they are also moving and starting to learn. Majority of us, we were trained on media convergence, as well as putting advertising, media buying within media convergence. You can also check in terms of your community radio and community print media. The biggest question is, have they got that kind of training? Are they on the right level currently? And whose responsibility it is to ensure that those community medias are in the right space so that they can also move in terms of the media convergence. One other aspect of media convergence is universalization. which has provided open access to culture around the world. I mean, during lockdown, Master KG launched Jerusalem. All nations were dancing to Jerusalem. Some changed Jerusalem in their own language. I mean, we all had to learn the Jerusalem dance. Where is Master KG from? South Africa. And where is his content being consumed? Across the globe. I mean, there was also another video of all elderly Chinese women dancing to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is in our language. It's, I mean, I don't know how much more I can show convergence and media convergence through entertainment and other aspects beside Master KG Jerusalem. Promotion of pop culture. I mean, John Legend found one of our musicians online and invited him over. How do we use this media convergence and internet and the global community to make sure we showcase what South Africa is all about? Because I can tell you, if you can go now in any of the social network, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, you will find something there about whether someone from China or someone from wherever. It also increased cross-cultural consumption through digital media. The world through media have become smaller, internet and hybridization and sharing of videos and content. I mean, I got videos of, some tourists who are traveling in this high peak area, and it's a glass floor. They knew when they went up there that this thing is how many feet, higher above ground, but you'll find them scrolling on this glass and we are laughing at them. But that video was not even taken in South Africa. It must have been taken somewhere in Shanghai or wherever. But it's living in my cell phone, in your cell phone, and in South Africa. Before I just want to show there is a slide I haven't put that talks in terms of where is the future. In 2030, there's going to be launched a 6G. We currently have 5G. In the next 20 years, we are told that cell phones will be air charged. Fourthly, we are also told that everything will be done. Thank you. Fast connectivity, 1 terabyte test in 10 minutes. The aim for that terabyte is to go through within 2 minutes. So the test they have done, it was 10 minutes. I think it's doable. Artificial intelligence is going to be more advanced and HD quality. I'm told that artificial intelligence we will no longer need psychologists. I mean, you're gonna say, Siri, I'm not feeling okay today. I have a headache and I'm stressed and I'm sweating. Siri's gonna say, I think we need to do breathing exercises, Tiny. Close your eyes. Let's start breathing from 10, 9. I mean, we're getting there. Air charge cell phones. I mean, for Africa, this will be a game changer. And this will open lines of communication. I see people getting access to education because you don't need electricity, which is more rural. We're more rural, and electricity is still a problem in rural areas. Smaller smartphone, currently, we're going back to foldable. Smartphone. Samsung is busy testing a cell phone that you can fold in 4 pieces and use it as a screen, as a tablet, but they don't want it to be bigger than your hand. And holographic display on cell phone. I mean, we were shocked when we saw people who have passed away performing in their own event in a hologram. And we're like, this is not what we believe in. But holograms are going to be something of the future, and they're going to come directly from your cell phone. Biometric SIM card. I mean, consumers, we go I mean, the brands companies are going to understand exactly by the SIM card that is in your blood in terms of what food you like, what diet, I mean, your dietitian has changed. If you were not in a diet, they're going to understand your mood. I mean, you're gonna find yourself getting adverts on your phone that are saying you need to up your magnesium, you need to up your, I mean, vitamin D. Because the SIMs that are gonna be biometrics, they're going to be connected to a person. And I don't know what else, I mean, cyber and security, I don't know what's gonna happen. People are gonna know more about us when they don't even have to be in front of us. What is the future again? Gadgets and app-focused media. Yes, there will still be that market. Remember, the older market is shrinking. That will still need to have a printed, whether newspaper, magazine, or books, but everything will be going gadget-wise. We will be streaming live content. Everything will be done, I mean, virtually. And guess what COVID did to us? It forces us to go for IR forward, and it forces all of us to be able to understand that business can still be business. You don't need to be in the same area. And the future for media is gadgets. Whether it's a cell phone, whether it's a new gadget that's gonna come up in the next 10 years, but the future for media is gadgets. And that's it from my side. And Tasneem, I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Tiny. And let me apologize for the wobbly we had at the beginning, but you certainly recovered very quickly and very well. I must say that the more technology advances and the more smartphones you have in your house, the more I feel for the feel of a newspaper on a Sunday morning. You know, I think it's, yeah, maybe I'm from that generation that refuses to change, but it's also scary and it's also exciting. Okay, let me open the floor. Let's hear if there are any, and I think at this stage, we're on time, so we can afford to take questions or comments to any of the panel members, including Tiny. Thank you. Let's have a look. Anybody? Is there nobody that wants to speak? I think I must be scaring them off. Okay.
There's a question on this side. I don't know whether you can see it. How can we prepare for convergence as communicators?
Yes, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, I think the first thing we need to do as communicators, we need to understand the infusion between old media and the new media. Once we understand it, it enables the communicators to, as they draft their communication strategy, being aware. I'm going to make an example. In the past, let's say you want to communicate, I just want to take any day, a commemorative day. Let's take Heritage Day. In the past, you would focus Heritage Day on whatever event is going to happen, and a bit of information in terms of what does heritage means, where South Africa comes from. With a new medium and the new convergence media, you need to understand that if you're communicating about heritage, you need to understand that you've got various different types of platforms. If you're going to use newspaper, for example, you're gonna go with strip ads, call to action, information. But if you're gonna use online, you're gonna have to change what you have done into a video, which gives more weight and shareable. So the communication model you're using, it's going to give you more than the person who firstly downloaded that video. So it's gonna be shareable. Then you then go to your podcast. I mean, you can have somebody or your multimedia department capturing whatever it was done, but changing it into a question, sort of a Q&A to fit a podcast kind of scenario. Remember, you can also now on Twitter Space run your podcast and other things. Then you also have TV. What elements of the Heritage Day that you're going to, are you gonna go a memory lane in terms of our history and heritage? On TV normally you'll go for a 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whichever minutes. Then you move it from that to radio. What aspect of heritage are you going to do for radio? For me, I will go for a interview, or take one of monarchies or whichever person resemble heritage to go and answer questions directly. You look at what I'm offering now is that I'm giving you different, it's the same heritage message, but it goes differently on all these media platforms. So if you don't understand these platforms, you're not gonna be able to tweak and change your content so that it's effective for each type of platforms. Because we also have a radio in our stable, which is Vuma and Rise, we sort of had to, as a business, be able to say, we're going to give you a 360, a component of each what we have within our stable. This is what we can do for online. This is what we can do for TV. This is what we can do for radio. But in terms of a communicator, your strategy, your communication strategy for that municipality or organization or agency has to have the convergence element. So if it's not in your communication strategy, it's going to be difficult when you then go into planning, and because your strategy should talk to your planning, and your planning should talk to your campaigns. And I can attest all media houses are open to educate anyone who's willing to be taken through, because once we believe that once you know how to do it, it's going to be easy for you to navigate it.
Thank you, Tani. Okay, well responded to. We also have another question, and I don't know, it could be addressed to Nwabisa or to, well, it could be addressed to any of you. And the question is, as an editor, how do you deal with fact-checking information? Especially, I guess, in this era of citizen journalism and fake news. Nwabisa, shall I give you the first shot at it?
Sure. I mean, look, I mean, fact checking it's really the lifeblood of what we do, and tricky as it may be. I mean, it's become more yes, more difficult, particularly with the rise of misinformation etc. But it's also become easier because also technology gives us sometimes tools to be able to do, to do that work. I mean, now, if you say July riots, last year, there are tools that one were able to use whenever there was, pictures, that came out, and people say, oh, it's, this is happening somewhere in KZN, or this is happening. And when you use certain tools, you actually find out, actually, this is something that happened, in some other country, 2 years ago, whatever the case may be. So yes, technology has allowed us to be able to do more fact checking. But I also think the challenge, obviously, is one, having access to those tools, being, having the technical skill to know how to use them. And I think for us, part of what we do, because remember, I mentioned something about how newsrooms have shrunk. So what has happened is that we're partnering with organizations whose work is actually really to do that. Fact-checking organizations whose work is to do that. So yes, there is the basic fact-checking that happens, in the newsroom, where you actually, call the person, did you actually say this and what's going on, etc. That's kind of like the most basic. But I think if we're talking something sort of more complex, we are able to, access those technological tools to be able to do so. And it is vitally important that we do, because, trust in not just the media, trust in the integrity of the information that we put out, is absolutely vital.
Thank you so much, Nwabisa. I don't know if any other panel members would like to add. I thought it was quite comprehensive, but maybe there was a point that we were missing out. I guess the emergence of fact-checking organizations like Africa Check and others is part of the way in which we have to adapt to the new conditions. But yeah, so we are seeing some of them emerging. But yeah, nearly not enough. I think we've had that barrage of fake news every time anything is issued from government, and even when not. So we've had to face that during COVID-19 and beyond as well. So we're also quite victim to it. I see Prof. Berger wants to say something. Welcome, Prof. Over to you.
Thank you, Tasneem. Yeah, this question of fact-checking, of course, the journalists have a major responsibility, and they need the skills there to avoid being taken in. And of course, never to willingly present information that's not verified. But of course, today, it's not just in journalism, it's also, in a lot of other quarters. And so that puts the onus then on the public itself to raise its level of what at UNESCO they call media and information literacy. And there, it comes down to the schools providing education in these competencies. It comes down to the universities running courses on this. It's also for the media to educate the public on this, and particularly then for social media to offer some kind of education, informal education in this. And the reason why I raise this is also because people may know last year South Africa was host of the World Global Week for Media and Information Literacy, which is the last week of this month. This year it will be headquartered in Nigeria, but it's a global event, and each country is encouraged to undertake its own discussions and events on these questions. So I just want to say, much as media have a responsibility, and a big responsibility, the problem goes wider than just the media. And I think South Africa and GCIS could, in particular, could seize on this moment of the last week of October, which is this global week for media and information literacy. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof. Certainly something we'll think about. Nwabisa, you want to come back?
Yes, I really want to underscore what Prof is saying. I think I made a point earlier to say that although we have, with the changes that we've seen in the innovation and technology, fact checking has become more difficult. I think perhaps it's something that I need to stress. Obviously, the technicalities of doing the fact checking is, it has become easier. But the prevalence of the need for us to fact check, because, and Prof is absolutely correct to talk about, everybody who has a cell phone now has the ability to disseminate any information from anywhere. If you think about your community WhatsApp groups and those kinds of things, and the tragic thing I think we've seen is that, yes, people now have far more access to information and the ability to spread information. Yet that kind of learning of, almost when the minute you receive something, say on your cell phone, etc., you first question if it actually is real. That kind of learning has not really happened, at least not sufficiently enough. And I just want to underscore, what Prof is saying is hugely important, in particular for democracies. There is a very real threat, to a stability of a nation, to a democracy, if we are unable to be as a people, just be far more, conscientized about, what information is real and what is not. And yes, there are some programs, there is some work that is being done by, perhaps different organizations. It's not nearly enough. And I really would like to, if possible at all, to implore from your side to be able to see what it is that we can actually do. It's not one sector. And I know, Tasneem, you've said, some of these problems don't affect the media alone, and you're absolutely right. So it's not one sector, but how do we educate people to question the legitimacy of something and not really be sort of vulnerable to anything that comes through being believed and taken as is. I think it's very, very important that we do that.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. Okay, any more questions? Kensani Baloy. Kensani. Why has the name disappeared suddenly? Ah, there we go. Kensani had a hand up. Do you want to speak, Kensani? Okay, might have been a mistake. The volume was also very low. Okay, if there are no more questions or no more comments, I don't think that the absence of a barrage of hands going up means that people are not interested. I think that, on the contrary, it's just that so many of us agree with what has been said here, and also remain in awe of some of the issues that were raised. I think Nwabisa, for example, when she spoke about the struggles that journalists continue to face, many of us see that happening. We see, journalists being victimized on the basis of their gender or their race, or something they said, or some place they were, and we see that trend. It's a very unhealthy trend, and it's also something that that happens to people other than journalists. Anybody that's outspoken or wants to challenge, people who might be spreading fake news or misinformation, they get victimized very, very quickly. So it's something that we all witnessing. And I think, the issues that she also raised around economic pressure and what's happening in the newsrooms is something that we're also all feeling. I'm not sure if colleagues, you're even aware that we ourselves at the GCIS, through continuous budget cuts, are not even able to sustain the link between Cape Town and Pretoria through our Imbizo room. So we haven't been able to invest in a technological infrastructure that, never mind enter the 4IR, just keep up with the very basics of keeping people in touch. So it's a trend that's continuing all over the world, not just in South Africa. I think Nwabisa also raised the critical point about self-reflection in the media space. I think, the issues that are emerging specifically with independent media and them refusing to subject themselves to the Press Council and to the regulation of the Press Council it's a difficult issue. It's certainly unprecedented, and it's certainly something that, in my view, we should all be a lot more vocal about, including the media themselves, and also, from government and other places. And I think it's something that we do need to work hard at defending the independence of the media space and making sure that, journalism doesn't become, entering into the political fray. So I think those are very critical points. I think Prof. Berger also reminded us that there's a lot of hope, and that, he spoke to the legacy of brave journalism that continues to thrive in South Africa, and that is due in no small part to many of the brave journalists who actually laid the basis for young people to follow and to speak out, even when faced with grave danger, and that's the kind of journalism that we want to see continuing to thrive in South Africa. But he also reminded us that it is under threat, as always. It's always been that, anti-democratic forces will move towards closing down spaces for the people and media to debate. It's just that the technology nowadays is so much faster, but it's not a new trend. I mean, there's always been that, anti-democratic forces will fight to make sure that they maintain their vested interests. I think the interesting discussion that we had from Tiny also spoke to a reality that we all need to come to terms with. I mean, even as we all, we all talk about how we miss newspapers, we swipe quite quickly from one TikTok video to the next. And I think the basic message that Tani was telling us is that giving us an understanding of the world of the future, what it looks like, and then the basic message to all of us, government, media, and everybody, is adapt or die. And I think that's something that we all got to take on board and see what it is that we do to make sure that we quickly jump aboard and adapt. I think our communication strategies are one thing. I think we also need to look at bringing in creativity into this space, the information space, because, someone who knows how to write and tell a story is not necessarily someone who knows how to create a TikTok video. So I think that it speaks to various skills, and it speaks to how we bring them on board. I think there's some action points. The media engagement team, led by William Baloy and by Tsegofatso Modubu, I'm sure they've been listening keenly. They've recorded this. There are action points for them to take up, specifically some of the things that were mentioned by Prof. Berger. 5 points he gave us. I'm not sure about the Kara front. We can certainly try, but we've tried ourselves to use it for an anti-corruption campaign. We once got an allocation, and then it was taken to much more urgent needs. So we can certainly try, but some of those are quite doable. And I think it says to us that by next year this time, we should have at least achieved some of them. And I think also, just to mention that, as institutions, we're all institutions are undergoing a similar kind of trend with citizen journalism and the advent of social media and, events that caused individuals to lose trust in institutions. All institutions, organized institutions, including the media, including government, including business, have all dropped in the kind of trust that individuals bestow on them. And we saw that trend happening since around 2008. It's also an indicator of the kind of stability or the lack of stability one has in society, especially if voices are diverse. It's not a problem, but when the divergent voices lead to conflict and lots of conflict, it does become something that worries governments all around the world and worries institutions all around the world, because there are some things that need to be in place in order for us to move forward as societies, as we did under COVID-19, because the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how media and government can work together and how we can successfully, maybe slowly but successfully, fight fake news, where we can fight misinformation, and where we can work together for the greater good. So I think we at GCIS do believe that this partnership, we can build on that partnership, and we can learn how to use new technologies to strengthen the partnership, and we can make sure that we engage around a common vision for South Africa. So I think, and for making sure that we keep our country a healthy democracy. So we believe our colleagues in the media are essential partners for us. Let there be no doubt about that. And we can make sure that we do this education campaign. We make sure that the public are well informed and they have access to vital information, and continuously fight against those who would seek to create discord. So with those few words, I think I want to say thank you very much to our panelists. I want to say thank you very much to our participants and the organizers of this event. And I think a YouTube link will be sent to all the participants so that they can go back and listen to it again or watch it again if they want to. And we hope that, panel members, you'll be joining us next year again, and hopefully we'll have some more positive news to report when we meet about our achievements for over this 1 year. And with that, let me bid you a fantastic afternoon and say goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Tasneem. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Highly informative and enjoyable, but thanks, thank you, and thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Baloy.